Today, I'd love to talk about content that clicks and how to find and use your brand voice. And so, you may be familiar with branding, but I'll talk a little bit more about what that means, as especially if you are someone who is an entrepreneur, a teacher seller, all of these things. But a little bit of background on me. I used to be a teacher. You can see my Fox in Socks from Dr. Seuss Week there when I was a kindergarten teacher for a few years. So my background is early childhood. I was a classroom teacher for a few years until my oldest was born, and she's now in kindergarten herself. I have three girls and another baby on the way, as I said, and now I have pivoted into more business mentoring and brand strategy. When I initially started my entrepreneurial journey, I did have a TPT store, but I was also mainly designing for other TPT sellers. So I was freelance designing, and then I became a brand designer specifically. I was doing brand and web design, and I really found that the pieces that people really needed help with, more than just fancy design and graphics and artwork, was to get to the core of their brand and to get to the strategy behind how they wanted to show up, who they want to be in their business, how they want to impact the world through the work that they are doing. And so that's really what I am passionate about now, because I do believe that the most sustainable success is at the intersection of your authentic expression and strategic action. So I want to encourage you to be fully who you are and share that effectively with the people who need you. So in true teacher fashion, I thought I'd start with the end in mind here and share the objective, which is to cultivate a genuine and effective way of communicating within your business and establish a natural framework that guides your communication. So branding in a nutshell is simply how you present your business to the world and how it is perceived by others. So I hope that after this presentation, specifically with brand voice, that you'll leave with a greater understanding of how to find your unique way of communicating, and that you can create a bank of specific language that you can use to genuinely and effectively communicate in your business. So before we go any further, I do have to make an assumption here that you have done perhaps some of the inner work, if you will, of figuring out your purpose in business and in life, and that you know the kind of person that you are and who you want to be, because brand voice is really like the tip of the iceberg. It's how you express all of that. So I'm not going to get into some of those maybe deeper philosophical questions in this presentation, although that is something that I do help clients with. So the bottom part of that, the self-knowledge, the self-trust, is what I coach people through and mentor people through to help them develop self-understanding, self-trust, so that they can know who they are and therefore show up in the way that reflects their true genius. So there's more information about that here. But then if you want to find out more after this about specifically brand voice and how to take that further, I do have a mini course on brand voice, helping you to express all of that, the lower stuff, to help you attract aligned clients with authentic content. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So to back up to our objective, I just wanted to kind of parse out like what I mean by genuine and what I mean by effective. So the reason that these two are paired together, and this is like what I am passionate about in business, is having both. Because if you show up in a way that is inauthentic to you, it's not going to be sustainable. And that's what I found in my first several years of business, and with many of the people that I was working with, was they were trying to build a business that didn't really reflect who they were. And so they were faking it till they made it, or trying to. And it just was a path to burnout for many. And I think we all know what that feels like, to work really hard towards something that isn't fulfilling us or lighting us up. And so I want to make sure that what the brand voice that you create is truly genuine, so that it is sustainable and fulfilling. And then, of course, effective, you want to be able to connect with the people that you're trying to reach. And that also means conversion. So you want sales. That's why you're in business. And you want the way that you communicate with people through your brand voice to bridge that gap and close the barriers between what you're trying to communicate and the way that they perceive your business. And you want to be memorable, you want to be top of mind, you want to be someone who stands out in an increasingly saturated market, particularly with, many of us are selling digital products. If your products are similar to somebody else's, what helps you to stand out is actually your content and you having a distinct brand voice that tells a little bit about who you are, your values, and helps people to have a connection with you that goes beyond just the product that they're looking for, the problem that you solve for them, and takes it a step further because there might be 30 other products out there that meet that same need that they're looking for. But what will help you to stand out is the way that you communicate that to them. And that includes you being yourself. So voice threads are something that I talk about in my mini course, and I'm going to talk about one of them specifically today. But these are different areas of your brand voice that you can kind of parse out to really flesh them out so that you have a framework of sorts. I call it like your brand DNA, like you have a blueprint for how you want to communicate and show up in your business and throughout your content. And when I say content, that could be a blog if you have one, that could be YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you are marketing your business. You want to show up and share a little bit of, what your business is about. And you can do that by having these different brand voice threads figured out. So tone is, I'm just going to briefly go through what they are, but then I'm going to specifically focus on language today. So tone is the way that you evoke feeling through your language. Rhythm is the pacing of your communication. Language is the literal words. Stories, of course, are, the things that you share about your life or other people's lives, or doesn't have to necessarily be a real story, but we all know what stories are. And then truth themes are those motifs that you come back to, the things that feel very alive and vibrant for you, if you will, that they kind of keep coming back to you. They're top of your mind. And it's things that you almost like can't not share about. So we're going to focus on language for a little bit. And as I said, that's literally the words that you use, the vocabulary you use to communicate your message. So phrases, metaphors, words, all of those things. Words can evoke feelings and they can build trust or distrust, and they establish memorability. And this doesn't have to just be catchphrases, although that's something that comes to mind, like Nike's "Just Do It" or "Have It Your Way." When you hear these things, they evoke certain types of feelings in you and they can build trust. And of course, they're memorable, but it can also be a way that you relate with people. Like if somebody says in their blog, "Right, mama," like they're obviously speaking to a certain type of person, and that could be you or not be you. You could hear that and that doesn't really relate to you, or it might. Or this could be in your emails. I read someone's emails and they regularly sign off with cat hair and warm hugs. And if that, relates to you as someone who that certain kind of vibe is cozy, and if you're a cat person, that might relate to you. And that is something that's very memorable. And so when you see that, you think of them. And so using particular words can help you to stand out and be memorable as you create your content. So some questions to think about as you're considering the words that you want to use in your content is, how do you want people to feel? What kind of feelings do you want to invoke? Do you want to embolden people? Are you wanting them to feel, do you want to come across a certain way, for example, as professional, but then take that a step further? Because you come across as professional, are you wanting them to feel a sense of stability, security? What kind of connection do you want to be made there through the words that you are using? And then, of course, to consider, what do you actually say in real life? And this is more important if your brand is more of a personal brand, which mine is. But I know as we sell digital products, some of us might not want to be like up front and center with our face, and that's okay. But again, the way that you communicate, the more genuine, the more easy it is to actually continue to communicate sustainably. So, what are things you would actually say? I actually used to be a ghostwriter, was one of the things that I did for freelancing, and I wrote for some big names. And some people, they cursed a lot in their emails. And if they didn't curse, if I hadn't picked up on that detail as I was ghostwriting for these clients, people would have noticed, because like, oh, that's weird. It didn't quite sound like them, because they didn't have the words that they normally would use and associate with them. So it doesn't have to be anything that specific, like curse words, but it's something, that if you are saying it all the time in real life, maybe people are going to notice if it's not showing up in your content. And then what gets the message across naturally? Like, you do still want to be effective. You don't want to water it down in such a way or fluff it in such a way where it's just all like a caricature of yourself, where it's over the top personality to the point where your message does not get across. But you still want it to have, it doesn't need to be jargon. It doesn't need to be overly cut or polished. It should get the message across in a way that feels natural to you. So as I mentioned, I was a ghostwriter. And so this would be a fun exercise that you could do later, is to ask someone who knows you well, maybe a spouse or a friend or someone that you work with online, and ask them to ghostwrite you. And so ghostwriting, if you're not familiar, I know I didn't explain it before, is really just writing as if you were that person. And so ghostwriting is very common nowadays with emails, blogs, even books are ghostwritten, where someone will write it on behalf of the other person, and that person still signs their name to it. So ask somebody to ghostwrite as you, and it could be very telling the kinds of words that they decide to use to represent your voice. You might get an idea of the way that your language comes across to someone who knows you well, the things that you don't realize that you say all the time, as well as some of those other voice threads like tone. You could get an idea as someone writes in your voice and your style, the way that you sound and the feelings that you evoke. So that might be a fun exercise to get an idea of the words to use. But you can create a bank of these words, and this is homework, if you will, to take note of the words that you have, maybe thought of as we've gone through this, of what words do I use in real life? What words help to get the feeling across that I want my potential customers to feel when they interact with my brand? And keep them in a document for reference. This can be the start of a brand style guide. This is a great way to even pass this off to team members if you have them now or in the future, so that they can get an idea of the way that you want your brand to come across. And it can be really helpful as you are starting to get a hold of how to really show up in your content with a unique voice, to have this bank to refer to. And it's sort of like scaffolding. This isn't something that you have to follow to a T and always use every time you write content, but it can almost be helpful to ghostwrite yourself for a while as you get a feel for how you want your brand to come across to the world. And so in closing, I just want to say that, the reason that this is so important, again, I just want to reemphasize, is that There are so many people, and I'm grateful, so many people doing what we do now online and sharing digital products and being online entrepreneurs. And I think that there's enough for all of us, but we do each need to stand out in our unique way. And I do believe that there is someone who needs to hear you say it in the way that you say it. And so bringing out your unique brand voice is only going to be better for everyone because somebody needs to hear it in your way. And the more that you share it, the more sustainable it is for you, the more fulfilling, and the more effective to reach the people that you want to reach. So again, this is where you can find me on Instagram at LiveHolyYou. My website there has the links to all of the ways to reach me. I have a lot of freebies as well as my brand voice mini course, which is a great next step if you want to continue to flesh out your voice threads, as well as long-term mentorship if that's something that interests you. I hope this was helpful to give you an idea of how to start bringing that brand voice to life.